a bit more fair, I suppose, that they went through in goal difference. But I think that's a harsh way to go out for Mexico, especially when you see that free kick. That free kick was. You seen it?
No, I've not seen it yet.
I think it was Chavez. Was the guy he hit it? He was like dead centre, maybe about 35 yards out, there or thereabouts, dead centre, and he just absolutely left foot top corner. One of the best free kicks that I've ever seen, anyway.
Talking of free kicks and that delightful tracksuit that you're wearing, it takes me back to the 90s, and I seen that's a cracker. I seen one of the compilations that Lil Z does on Twitter, and I shared it, and it was of Big Van Hooijdonk. And listen, I'm not saying that we've got a striker at the moment who reminds me of Van Hooijdonk, but there is one aspect to the contract breakdown and talks, etc., that is reminiscent of the Van Hooijdonk situation. So we're going to have a wee chat about some of the gossip that's going around at the minute, JP, regarding incomings, outgoings, as you do. We're going to touch on the World Cup because, I'm actually thinking I might cover a couple of the games because there's a few, obviously, of Celtic interest. Netherlands versus USA, for example. Yesterday's tagline is Carter Vickers the best we've had since Van Dijk, and people then instantly say there's no way he's as good as Van Dijk, and obviously that's not the question. Is he the best since Van Dijk? Van Dijk's the best defender I've ever seen playing for Celtic in my lifetime, and I'm not just saying that regarding what he's done post Celtic, JP. I remember sitting watching him just thinking this guy really is different level. Completely different level player.
Martin?
I remember seeing Lee Martin breaking his leg for Celtic. Around about the time, I'm not laughing because he broke his leg. Around about the time we were wearing that tracksuit, I think, actually. Maybe a year or two before that. But I remember Lee Martin. The Hampden season, JP, guys like Lee Martin got a game. A big fella called Jim Slavin got a game.
I remember him.
Yeah, Barry Smith played a few games. He actually played against Rangers on at least one occasion. In fact, he might have played twice because I think he might have played in the game where the banner, remember they flew the banner over the stadium because we were locked out. The fans were locked out. I'm sure Barry Smith played in that game. So, I've seen defenders and I've seen defenders, and Van Dijk was up there. He was up there. Another player actually that played in that Hampden season was Mark McNally. He was another young product of the Celtic Academy who came through. But yes, we're going to be talking all about that, the Scottish Cup draw. There's been a friendly announced, although it was announced by the opposition side, so that's coming up on the 10th of December. That's something we're going to be covering. And we are going to be talking a wee bit about the 90s, JP, a wee bit of a throwback. So tell me a wee bit about your environment in respect of the 1990s and you preparing your setting for the 90s, because obviously the tracksuit's a giveaway, and that's a cracker.
Well, I remember coming through with my dad to Glasgow. He used to always bring me through around about Christmas time, and I would tell Santa what I wanted for Christmas. I think maybe by the time he got me this tracksuit, I'd figured out that Santa wasn't real. In fact, I've not really told many people this, but I set up a tripwire in my bedroom to try and catch this.
I love this, man.
And
who did you catch?
I caught my dad putting the bag of presents at the end of my bed, but I pretended I was asleep and I didn't hear him stumble as he came through my door. But
I'm just imagining a young JP thinking, there's something about this, there's something not quite right. I'm going to have to prove what the situation is.
I shattered Christmas for myself in one fell swoop by catching them. But so yeah, I think by 94 or whatever it was, whatever year this trackie was, I'm pretty sure it was 94 because I think we were wearing this in the League Cup final.
Yeah,
the Ibrox.
I'm sure Lou McCarry was wearing that. In the Ibrox,
yeah.
In his first game. I know that Frank Connor took the team that day, but it was officially Lou McCarry's first game in charge. I'm sure he was wearing that tracksuit.
Brian O'Neill scored in the last minute.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Obviously, before I was going to games home and away regularly, but anyway, we came through to Glasgow as we always did. It was tradition, and we'd go to the shops, and I think I picked this trackie out as my Christmas present, and I still got it all these years later because obviously anything like that, I mean, it's Celtic for a start, but it's my dad got me it, so it means a lot. And,
Big time.
Yeah, I was at that game with him at Ibrox. That was the first cup final that we went to together. And the 90s, I suppose, was just that was the sort of time when I figured out that, you know, you need to appreciate the good times when they come along, because you know, that 95 final was, I've said it before, but it was so huge in terms of, for everybody associated with the club. Saw what it meant to the players, the manager. We'd been in a really bad way for a long time, and so whenever we do well now, whenever we win anything now, I always appreciate the moment, because you don't know when there's going to be another one. And obviously we've been very, very, very lucky to live through a time recently where we've absolutely steamrolled everybody. You know, I mean, the idea of 4 trebles in a row, if you'd said that to me, that would happen one day as I'm trudging at Ibrox, seeing guys throwing their scarves in the stairwell, hearing that Coca-Cola Cup song on a loop as we were leaving, and watching Wraith Rovers fans celebrating, dancing in the streets of Wraith, as Jack Young said. It was a hard time, but
like you say, it galvanises you. It galvanises you.
Yeah, that's character.
You know, whenever I'm asked about greatest games, etc., some people might be surprised that I always bring up the Airdrie game, because it wasn't a great game. It was rubbish, actually. And back then, that was in the time where I would get my mother to tape the game, so when I came home I could watch them again. And I watched the full 90 minutes, and it was dross. I mean, Van Hooijdonk scored 9 minutes. Great cross by Tosh McKinley, by the way. I never tire of watching the goal, especially in against John Martin. But we'll not get into politics. And but that team, like you say, it really was getting over the line for the first time since 1989. And it takes me back to talking about Celtic tracksuits. First ever Celtic tracksuit I had, JP, was the centenary one, which I know you've got a version of now, silk, silver and green.
I do.
I love that.
I don't tend to buy the kind of remakes of the tops. I only sort of get the originals, but I had to make an exception for that tracksuit top, because I've got a picture of myself at Little Marco's play area in Edinburgh wearing my mate's version of the original at the time, so it would have been 88, and just because I never got it myself at the time, I was like, right, I need to get that. And it is as far as replicas go, it is a really, really good one. It's got C.R. Smith in the back and everything. It's they've done it well, because some of them you see and they're not the best.
They're a bit dodgy. But there was another thing I remember that season. There was a wee sports shop in Pennycook where I lived at the time, and they seemed to have all this kind of stuff on tap. And there was an alternative which was the same design, but it was a jersey, and it had the wee button. Can you remember that?
Yeah,
it had the granddad collar.
You posted recently.
I think so. Aye.
Yeah, where there's like a group of like a guy, a lassie, and a kid, and they're all wearing all the different versions of the training gear and stuff.
I often look at the pictures and think, where are they now?
Yeah.
And there was always like strangely enough, an American football style top, wasn't there? There was always an American with a big number in the middle, 88 probably.
I think they were just cashing in on the popularity of American football at the time, because remember Channel 4 started showing that, and it became a big deal. I became obsessed with the Chicago Bears for some reason. I didn't really understand the game or anything, but there was some sort of like glamour attached to American football. I had no idea what was going on, but I'd be like, all right, I'm going to watch some American football.
They know how to add a bit of box office to it, don't they?
It just looks good.
Exactly, aye. They really brand it well, and I think that's one of the big things down south. There's loads of money in the game, we know that, but they brand it so well. JP, they make you believe that you want to watch a game, and then you end up watching it and thinking that was a bit rubbish. But they brand it to such a degree that they reel you in. They totally reel you in. I want to start off with Giakoumakis, because I'm not comparing him as a player to Pierre Van Hooijdonk. He obviously, we signed him from the same league. And when we did sign him, I always think back to a comment that was made by Anthony Joseph, who I rate highly, from Sky Sports, and he was talking at the time that VVV Venlo were looking for €12 million for Giakoumakis had they stayed up. And obviously they were relegated, and Celtic nipped in and were able to do yet another brilliant deal. But I'm looking at, over the last few weeks, this story that broke last night, first thing I'm thinking is, somebody's a bit mischief making, because the press seem to be looking for bad news stories in relation to Celtic against good news stories in relation to Rangers. It's as simple as that.
So many at the moment, isn't there? Oh my
God. Ryan Kent took a great shot at training. Brilliant. That's a headline.
The squirrels have been unleashed.
It's unbelievable.
In one force.
It's incredible. We're going to have a wee chat about that narrative, but Giakoumakis, he's a player who I remember when he came in being completely unconvinced by him. I thought his touch was terrible, and obviously that came back to haunt me to a degree, because he obviously kicked on and became a really important part of the squad. But I do remember 2 games, Hearts and Alloa, early doors, and I didn't see what the attraction was. He obviously wasn't fit. But his goal scoring record has been tremendous. 2021-22, 29 games played, 17 goals and an assist. But if you break it down to minutes, JP, it's a goal scored or created every 82 minutes in his first season, followed up by this season, 21 games, far fewer starts, 8 goals, 1 assist. So in 920 minutes, 102 goal every 102 minutes. Overall, he scores or creates a goal every 88 minutes. So if Giakoumakis is on the pitch, he's going to be involved in a goal every game, basically. He's one of the guys I thought he had that potential to be a cult player at Celtic, but recently, JP, Ange hasn't been picking him. Even when Kyogo went through that wee sticky patch. Is that now becoming clear as to why that's the case, do you think?
Possibly, but I mean, it's all kind of speculation, isn't it? I mean, I know things don't normally, there's no smoke without fire and everything like that, but I've seen enough false headlines from the Daily Record, the Sun, whoever else you want to name. Remember the Thugs and Thieves headline about the night out in Newcastle. Mm-hmm. Martin O'Neill was supposedly taking over at Manchester United. Henrik Larsson was in the building at Manchester United, apparently. Didn't sign for them until 3 years later, so they got it right, but I mean, not like that. And of course there could be something in it, and if he's been made a promise about, I mean, I've read loosely what it is. Apparently, if he had a successful first season, he would get a better or improved contract or something like that. That would have been similar to what he would have got if we'd have paid 12 million for him from Venlo. I mean, that seems a bit far-fetched. I don't know if I picked that up wrong, but I don't know how you can go from, earning whatever it was, he was based on a 2.5 million transfer, to then say, all right, well, you'll get wages comparable to what you would have got there. I don't know. There's obviously a wage structure within the club, and if what he's wanting is out with that, then I guess the only option is, if he thinks he can get it, if his agent thinks he can get it elsewhere, then he's 27 years old. I guess once you're the wrong, seems crazy to say once you're the kind of wrong side of 24, you need to start thinking.
Mate, that was 20 years ago for me.
Oh, same. Same. I mean, we're not professional footballers.
Far from it.
I was going to say thankfully, but no, I would obviously have loved to have been a professional footballer. But no, but they've got that window in which to earn as much money as they can. I certainly don't think if he was to go anywhere else, it would be because he doesn't enjoy being at Celtic, because it seems to be clear that he does enjoy being at Celtic. But with Ange's comments and pressers of late, where he's kind of saying we need to be cutthroat and that we can't sort of cling on to people. We've done that. We have been guilty of doing that in the past. Maybe even with the likes of Tom Rogic. At some point, we could have probably sold Tom Rogic for a reasonably good fee, and he's ended up leaving for nothing, and now he's struggling at. I don't even know what he's up to. I've not kept an eye on whether he's been playing at West Brom or not, but there might have been a point where Tom Rogic was a very sellable asset, but we obviously you show loyalty to players, and guys like James Forrest, obviously you could cite him as being an example of someone that we've maybe held on to for too long, because he could have possibly been sold and played in the Premier League. I don't doubt that he could have done that. But Giakoumakis, within this new regime and this new setup, it might make, it sounds mad, but it might make sense to sell him. I would, again, like Juranovic, I wouldn't want him to go January because it doesn't feel like the right time for him to go. I'd rather he went at the end of the season if he was going to go at all. I mean, is there any real rush to get him out the door in January? I don't know. Why would there be?
I think the rush is from the agent. I just smell a rat when these types of things happen, JP. You know, and that's why I brought up Pierre, because you'll remember there was a few players around about that time who came up with this comment in relation to I was promised a wage increase. I mean, that was back in the 90s, and probably things were a bit slacker then. In the modern game, JP, nothing's on a wing and a prayer. Everything's in black and white. So if there's going to be an improved contract, it's going to have been agreed in black and white, in the terms of your contract. It's not as like a gentleman's agreement. That doesn't exist in football.
Which is what Pierre kind of alluded to. He said it was like a handshake thing, like a sort of an unwritten, unrecorded thing that was like, oh yeah, we'll give you more money. It's like that's not going to fly when you actually sit down and be like, right, mind what you said. Like,
broken, no, exactly.
No, I don't remember that. and that promises. That's pretty poor patter on whoever was dealing with the contract things on the Celtic side, because you'd like to think that they'd be as good as their word, but obviously doesn't work like that, and you need to have everything tied down, like you said. It will be written down. It will be in a contract. There's no way it was just a kind of like in the showers after the game. By the way, we'll sort you out. Yeah, a better contract.
We'll see what happens. I know, and the thing is, Celtic were really bad pre-Fergus as well, because you remember that was the reason why Paul Elliott left the club and Frank McAvenny left the club first time round when he was a real asset, and it was because there were promises that were broken by the board. Fergus comes in, Van Hooijdonk, and I think Di Canio both accused the club of the same. But in this day and age, like you say, you know, they know what the situation is, and if that situation is after season 1, which is what we're being led to believe, we're going to have a discussion about improved terms. There's no way you could put yourself in a situation, JP, where you're offering this and their expectations on a completely different level. I mean, in this day and age, I'm just not buying that. So I think maybe there's a bit of mischief making in relation to the agent. I think that's probably why it's broken in the press, because it's not come from Celtic. Celtic have been a tight operation, certainly since Ange came in. And if that's the case and they're wanting a move, I'm pretty sure Ange will move them on. And this is actually quite an apt comment coming in from Jungle Lion. Welcome to the show, Jungle Lion.
Say that.
We need a presser.
I was just going to say, he's going to get hit while he's at the next presser, and we'll find out, because he's not the type of guy that will bat it away, will he? He will tell the truth.
He'll take it absolutely head on, won't he? Yeah. But yeah, there's all this kind of thing going on, and simply because I wasn't convinced when he first came into the side doesn't make any difference to where I am now with Giakoumakis. I'd much rather we had, and I've said this all season, Kyogo, Giakoumakis plus a signing in January. So I think it throws a wee bit of a spanner in those works, because although we're going to get on to someone who's been named in the gossip columns as a potential target, I'm pretty sure Ange will have players lined up, JP. I don't have that concern. But going back onto your point there about Juranovic and Giakoumakis, is it the right time? I would probably look at that a wee bit differently and say, well, January's the right time, certainly, to get the replacements in. So you're thinking Champions League next year. And although it wouldn't be great to lose Juranovic and Giakoumakis, if they're going to go, let's do it now so that we can get 2 new players in, bed them into the team, and once we get into the Champions League, we'll be far better prepared, rather than what we had done season after season, you know, bringing guys in far too late, JP, sometimes only when we knew we were going to get the finance. So I'm looking upon it like that. If he was to go, he's 28 years of age next week, so completely over the hill by next week, JP.
No, I wasn't implying that by what I was saying about his age, about being over the age of 24. I wasn't implying that. I mean, God, he's got a good, 4 or 5 years at the top left in him yet, but it's where he wants to play at that time and how much he wants to earn at that time. And again, it could be agent driven, I don't know, but he certainly doesn't give me the impression, and I've not seen it from him, that he's the type of player, when he's been playing recently, that he doesn't want to be there or is giving off bad vibes. And I would say the same for Juranovic as well. I mean, I know people have been like, "Oh, he's not been at it this season. Get rid of him." You know, he's. I don't think that. I don't think that from Juranovic either. I think there's a few players that haven't been as good as they probably were last season, and that's probably down to a variety of things. The distraction of the World Cup coming up, which he obviously had in his mind because he knew he would be a first team player at, and you know the congestion of fixtures, the European games that they've had a lot more on their plate. You know, sort of August to November this season than they did August to November last season. So the break for a lot of them that weren't at the World Cup will probably done them good. And then we'll see how things play out when they come back.
The other thing about Juranovic I would throw into that mix is the fact that there was those strong links to Chelsea in the last transfer window. You know, I think even Fabrizio Romano, who gets it right a lot of the time, not all the time, he had said, you know, he was on his way. And that can unsettle a player. You know, it definitely can unsettle a player. So he's had all that to contend with as well. Juranovic, the latest club who apparently are interested in him is West Ham. So destination England, it would appear. What value would you place on Giakoumakis, JP? I mean, we've got him until 2026, you know, so we're in a strong position to haggle. What do you think?
Which is why this rush to get him out the door in January doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if he did leave at the end of the season after scoring goals that helped secure us hopefully another league title and maybe more than that, I as much as it would be kind of like a bit sad because obviously you become attached to the guy. I was in Murphy's on Saturday after I finished work, met up with some pals. Paul Sheridan was playing in Murphy's and he was doing like little kind of medley numbers and he sang the Giakoumakis 99 Red Balloons song and the whole place is, you know, full pelt singing it. It's kind of rare when you get a song attached to you that people go for it in such a big way, and they have gone for it in a big way with him, and that usually sort of means that he's become the cult favourite that you are talking about. You hear the reception he gets when he comes off the bench. You know, people do love him within the crowd, and the fans do love him. So, but that's 2 years. We've always kind of said that the lifespan of a Celtic player that you're going to sell is usually 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it would be falling short of that by 5 months if he was to go in January. And I think if he was to go and we all knew he was leaving and everything else, and we'd all kind of made our peace with it, at the last game of the season, you would be able to give him the proper send-off that he deserves. I don't think it would be with any hard feelings if he was to leave, because people understand that it's not all about. I mean, obviously, the misty-eyed people would expect him to stay until he kicks his last ball in the game, but it doesn't always work like that. And I've certainly, after Henrik Larsson, if you can get over Henrik Larsson leaving Celtic, you can get over anybody leaving. And that was a sore one, because obviously when he came back and scored against us, it was one of the worst nights in football I've ever experienced. It was just horrible, and that was the beginning of the sort of end. No, actually, it wasn't the beginning of the end, because we did go on to take some scalps after that in the Champions League. But it was kind of one of the first times that we really got dented in the Champions League at home by an opposition side. Because up until that, our record at home had been really, really good. I'm pretty sure from my memory, we would always usually at least draw against sides. Like we drew against Bayern Munich 0-0 at home, and although that might not have looked like a good result at that time, rewind 10 years and tell yourself in 1993, 1994 that we would be in the European Cup or Champions League and getting a point at home to Bayern Munich. It would have been outrageous to say that. But like Larsson coming back to haunt us was a sore one. If we were to ever play a side with Giakoumakis in it, I'm sure that would be a sore one as well, just because you know that he gets it and you know that he loves the club. I can tell that from the handful of interviews I've seen with him after games. You know, when he scored that winner at McDermott Park, he basically visualised it as we were taking the kick off at after their goal. I love that stuff. So yeah, but I think it's just that I think people have to realign the way that they think about the players that we have and everything else. I know everybody wants us to hang on to everybody, but it doesn't always work like that, and we just have to trust the fact that we've got a scouting network now that is going to be picking up better players than it has done in the past. Like we're going after a Canadian international fullback who looks pretty decent from the game that I watched him in, or the couple of games I've watched him in. He's not shy of a tackle. He was like crunching into tackles. He's got pace, looks athletic. He's highly rated from people over there. Dominic Diamond says he's a player.
Hey.
that doesn't necessarily mean to say that holds any sway, but I don't think he would say that unless he...
Bit of specialist knowledge.
Yeah, I know. I don't think he would say that unless he had something to base it on. I know that, but yeah, I don't think we're shopping in the same markets that saw us get Albion Ayeti or Bolly Bolingoli or Jeremy Toljan. Or do you know? I just think there's a different profile now for a Celtic player under this management and this structure that leads me to not be as concerned if somebody like Giakoumakis was still in.
No, you're right, because I think the biggest example in recent times is when Kieran Tierney leaves and the trouble we've had with left back since then, probably right up to Greg Taylor coming of age, because we simply didn't have that recruitment in place, JP, and we were bringing in players that just were not fit for purpose. I mean, you mentioned Bolingoli, and the right back situation after losing Mikael Lustig. Yeah, we've gone through the amount of right backs we had until we found that the guy was under our noses all the time in Tony Ralston. But you reminded me by mentioning Henrik Larsson's goal for Barcelona against Celtic that Henrik Larsson...
triggers for anybody.
It does trigger. But the first and last goal scored by Henrik Larsson at Celtic Park were both against Celtic. Because he scored an OG. In the European game. He scored an own goal. Yeah, in a European game. Was it Intercab? Yeah, I think it was like Intercab or something like that. I think it was one of their teams. Yeah. And Larsson scores his first goal at Celtic Park in this game, and it's an own goal. And then the last goal he ever scored at Celtic Park is for Barcelona against us. So both his first and last goals at Celtic Park were against Celtic. There you go. There's a wee bit of trivia for you. Now, you mentioned, we're talking about Giakoumakis. He was born in Heraklion in Greece, which is the birthplace of Georgios Samaras, who left Celtic at a time where I would have kept him, right? But he leaves Celtic on a free transfer. So you mentioned Rogic earlier on. I think Samaras was a wee bit like that. You thought he's still got a couple of years in him. Had we sold him 18 months, 2 years previously when he's turning up for the big games against Barcelona, we could have really cashed in on him. We didn't. We ended up losing him for naught. But of course, Samaras and Rogic both go to West Bromwich Albion. So you mentioned, I'm not sure what he's up to, and neither was I. So I had a wee look. Now, since Tommy Rogic has signed for West Bromwich Albion, JP, here we go. Here's a rundown of his career, right? So he's made 6 appearances, and I'm going to give you the minutes that he's played in all 6 games. 57, which is the most minutes he's ever played in a game. 32, 31, 16, 14 and 10. So in total, he's played 160 minutes for West Brom. So he's really not kicking on, is he? You can see why he's been left out of the squad for the World Cup.
It started like on 56, and then it's gone down to 10 or 12. It was the last minutes that he'd played.
Nah,
it's just gradually just been like less and less and less. And I mean, the guy was still a good player for us last. When he was, it was last season, wasn't it?
And it was one off his last season.
He was still had moments where, and I think he played. Did he not play more games last season than he'd ever done?
Yeah, and I think the argument is whether or not it was his best season in terms of consistency, or certainly in the top 2. People argue that maybe the invincible season under Rodgers was his finest season, JP. But I reckon it was definitely up there in the top 2 seasons that he had at Celtic. And I was a wee bit surprised when the announcement was made. that he's on his way.
The time that he's not played or trained, isn't it? That's going to surely impact him well into this season, and we're now in December, and that's all he's played in this season. That's pretty sad. I mean,
not a full 90 minutes under his belt.
Aye, that's not how you want to. I mean, obviously it's a warning sign to any player that is leaving Celtic. But again, as much people will go, "Oh, well, that's a shame," and he could still be with us. But that's the kind of sympathetic side that you have towards players. And like I said, with regards to the potential future ins and outs in January, that's the new way of Celtic is, well, we're not just going to give new contracts out like sweeties just for people to be here and not really be part of the long-term strategy of the club. Kind of feels like a lot of those guys are part of the old guard, and maybe we won't see players sticking around for 5-6 seasons anymore. It'll be sort of probably max 3, and then try and make a decent bit of money on them and then replace them with somebody else, which I'm no expert on football. I've never claimed to be, but I would imagine that is what other clubs do that are successful in transfer and being a selling club or a trading club, is that they recycle their team a lot better than we have in the past.
The recycling, that's exactly the right word for it, JP.
It sounds harsh, doesn't it, to say recycling, because you're like dealing with
talk about human beings. Absolutely. But it's true. And the big thing again, people were laughing and spitting their tea out at the headline on Monday, where there was a suggestion that perhaps Celtic would be interested in Ryan Porteous, and they were thinking absolutely no chance. What we need to start remembering, JP, is that since Ange Postecoglou came in, he hasn't signed what would be regarded as a homegrown player. So your homegrown player is someone who comes through your own academy or someone who comes through another Scottish club's academy, regardless of their nationality. So, James McCarthy, that's why he's regarded as a homegrown player, because he came through at Hamilton, capped by the Republic Island. And we've not signed a single player, unless I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, who would fall into that category since Ange came in. And we've brought in a lot of players. So there has to come a time, because I don't think we're there yet with the B team, to promote 2 or 3 of the guys. We know who the prospects are, but they're maybe a couple of years off at JP. So there's going to be a period of time, maybe in the next year, 2 years, maybe up to 3 years, where we're buying the best of Scottish talent to make that quota. Because, as our Scottish players get older, and, you look at the European squad, we need 8 homegrown players in that European squad. 4 can be from the academy, 4. And that's why when we look at some of the squads, the big benches that you get in the European games, you've got guys on there, particularly last season, JP, and you're looking at them going, I better check who that is. There were occasions where the players were nowhere near the first team, but they had to make that quota. And I think that was the reason. I don't rate Ryan Porteous. I never have done. And I'd rather he wouldn't sign for Celtic. But we're going to start looking at Scottish players, the best of Scottish talent. And if we're going to do it, again, I just think it's about recycling, and it's about player trading. And that we've got enough surplus in our ranks that we could use some of the players that we've got maybe as make-weights to bring some of these guys in. So that's going to be interesting.
I don't have an issue with Ryan Porteous signing for Celtic, because of the one thing that I would be concerned about is his rash tackling, because I know he's been on the wrong end of some decisions, like the one where he went in on Joe Aribo and he didn't even touch him, and then Aribo laid, feigning injury for about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen from a football player, really. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. And I know there's maybe been Celtic players that are guilty of it. I would hate it just as much from any of our players. I just think it's such a beamer to lie there pretending you're injured.
Yeah.
And
remember Lafferty against Aberdeen, Charlie Mulgrew. That was one of the worst. One of the worst.
Well, I mean, sums him up, doesn't it? But Porteous has obviously on other occasions has been rash and obviously been red carded. So you don't want a liability in your team. We've had a few of them in the past, and they're not good. Certainly not in some of the massive games that we play, where you can't afford to be losing somebody. But I've got a lot of friends that are Hibs fans, and I see mixed reports on Ryan Porteous, the way that they talk about him. Some are not too bought into his hype, and then others think he's the best thing since sliced bread, or sliced veg, as Jack Grealish said the other day.
He did say that, didn't he? But that comes into, it's cabbage and ribs, so you get away with saying sliced veg when talking about
Danny Murphy used, he said that was another superlative pass from Lionel Messi.
Nice. I'd love to go through the old archive of Axon episodes and pick out all the mistakes. That would be tremendous. We'll get a show reel. There will be a few from me anyway. I normally say it and then realise instantly I've said it wrong, but it's too late. It's out there. There appears to be a bit of gossip around another player who's actually at the World Cup at the moment, JP, and Gue-sung Cho, South Korean 24-year-old centre forward who has scored 6 in 18 international games for South Korea. And I think it's yet another example of us, if true, lining up a kind of younger replacement. Very much like the Juranovic-Johnston scenario, whereby, it's not like for like, but we are, about 4 years younger, bringing them in. And if we were to do that, if Giakoumakis and Juranovic were to leave and we had those replacements lined up and they were to come in January, none more so a signal that this recruitment is completely turned around. The strategy might be the same. That's something that Brian says a few times. The strategy, bring them in young, sell them on for profit. That's the same, but we're just doing it better. We're doing it far, far better than we have done before, JP. And again, there's a player that I'll be watching with interest to see if he can turn that into a successful move for Celtic. Now, with regards to the World Cup, we will talk a wee bit about some of the games that might interest us. We will be touching a wee bit on the 1990s. The reason for that, of course, is that Simon Donnelly, I mean, you just think about wee Sid in the 90s. He had the hair. He wore a Celtic jersey that was 4 or 5 sizes too big for him. It was the baggy era in music. It was a baggy era in Scottish football. And Simon is part of a team who are putting together a tribute night in May next year at the Armadillo, and it's for obviously Wim Jansen and the team that stopped the 10. If you subscribe to A Celtic State of Mind on YouTube, and almost 20,000 of you have already done that, you'll go into a prize draw, you win 2 tickets. So we are going to start up our prize draws again, whereby we give something out every month, but by the end of this week, I'm hoping it will be at 20,000. And then we'll pull a lucky winner out the hat, JP. So let's talk about the 90s for a bit. It was the era, the decade of baggy, but even recently I seen a picture of Jackie McNamara when he signed for Celtic, and the jersey was literally 7 or 8 sizes too big for him. It was just horrific. I mean, that must have weighed him down. He was a wee skinny laddie back then, Jackie.
There's some good pictures of the Celtic players on a bus at that time. It might be, actually, I'm pretty sure Simon Donnelly told me that they went to Loch Lomond straight after a Celtic game one Saturday, and then he was at both nights at Loch Lomond. But there's a picture of them all on a bus, and I don't know if maybe Jackie McNamara organised the bus, but they're like, it just looks like wee guys on a school trip. They didn't look like Celtic players of today. They just look kind of like me and you at the time, probably, with the shades on and the I don't know, chippy jumper and baggy jeans, like probably like that kind of sort of setup. But no, I mean, obviously Simon Donnelly and the Wim Jansen, that Wim Jansen side that's the first time I saw, or I didn't see it with my own eyes because I was ill in bed. I've told that story before, but that league title win in that season and that League Cup victory, actually, which the anniversary was yesterday, I think it was, when we beat Dundee United at Ibrox.
Yeah,
I couldn't get a ticket for that game. I was so gutted. I just I was, my enthusiasm for Celtic was approaching fever pitch at that point, because I'd started going. I'd met my mate Michael from Saltcoats. I'd started going to games with him, home and away. He took me to my first away game. I think it was Dunfermline away that season, and I just wanted to go to everything. If Celtic were playing in the Moon, I'd have been looking for a ticket. So when I didn't get a ticket for the League Cup final, they were scarce. To be fair, I don't think there was, a lot of spares outside the ground or anything like that. So I had to settle for the Hoops Bar in the Gallgate, or formerly Macca's Bar. Frank McAvenny apparently used to have it. Before I went to it, I've always known it as the Hoops Bar, but I watched it in there, and my God, by the time Michael came back to get me after the game, I was absolutely hammered. And then we got a carry out for the train back to Edinburgh, and we got the last train back to Edinburgh, and then I think we went out. Maybe I have no idea how I managed to go out. I think I'd started drinking at like 1 o'clock, and then we went out to a pub in Edinburgh after the game, and it was just brilliant, like being able to celebrate Celtic winning a trophy, but winning it in style. It wasn't like the 1-0 game in '95. It wasn't fraught with tension. We beat them comfortably because, shock horror, we had a good side that would go on to win the league.
Yeah.
Despite a few bumps on the way. I mean, there was a few times maybe where you're thinking this might not be for us, and Rangers might actually get 10 in a row, and they'll be able to play their single that they released or didn't release, and
unthinkable
party that they advertised that then didn't happen. So
talking about unreleased singles, by the way, Celtic recorded a single in preparation of winning the 1970 European Cup. So aye, so
wait, is that Celtic are here?
I'm not sure which, because as far as I know, it was never released, and the players from the squad were in the studio and they were doing a single for potentially winning the 1970 European Cup.
I don't know what this was released for, but I've got a 7-inch single of Celtic are here, and it's featuring the playing squad. So, any commenters want to tell me what that was? If
exactly, what
people
was
of a certain vintage.
Totally, because at that time, obviously, there was all this chat, JP, around Celtic having not made enough money as a playing pool, enough money from winning the European Cup, and there was agents around the England 1966 World Cup winning squad, and there was agents around the Manchester United 68 European Cup winning squad, and both sets of players made a lot of money, if you like, from their success, and Celtic didn't. So there was this chat around 1970. They brought in an agent, which it happened. They brought in an agent to try and make them money, and part of that was a single that was recorded, but obviously unreleased from that era. And we have unearthed an unreleased Celtic single from 1987, unreleased, and we have had it re-recorded by a man you mentioned earlier, Paul Sheridan and the Wakes, and it's going to be released very soon, in a couple of weeks in actual fact, and we're going to be celebrating the release by doing a 24-hour AXOM Weekender once again for the 3rd year running, and we're going to be promoting it, all the downloads, etc. All the profit from that obviously will go to good causes, and we'll be announcing them very soon. The song's a belter. JP's heard it. It's the Wakes with Carly Connor on backing vocals, and we're actually recording the video on Saturday.
I was going to say, is it this Saturday?
Yeah. Aye. Anybody fancy joining us?
I might come along actually. If I'm
come down, get the scarf on.
What time is it at?
It's going to be, we're going to have to do it kind of early in the morning, JP, so that we avoid traffic and we avoid crowds and all that kind of stuff, but not too early. I mean, I'm thinking maybe 7 or 8. And then we're going to go down to the chapel, we're going to go down to St Mary's, and we have access in there, and we're going to film the promo video for the single, The Glory and the Dream. So that was a seamless little link there.
That Celtic Are Here song is 1970.
Oh, maybe it was used then. Maybe it was used, JP. That would be interesting. I've got a few others in the house.
I usually sing that when I've had a few sherbets.
Has there been a compilation? There must have been in the past of all these individual singles that came out. Because I remember there was Lord of the Wing.
Remember I showed you it the last time I sit, and then somebody was like, "Oh, that's awfully convenient that you've got it right there." And I was like, "Well, this is where I have all my CDs." So I thought I had it, but it's got like the Celtic rap on it and all that.
JP, superb. That Celtic rap was the reason that our song never got released, The Glory and the Dream. And I've got to say, ours is better. I'm
going to say that the Glory and the Dream probably a better bet for a Celtic song than the Celtic rap. I mean, that Celtic rap. I think they obviously. I know that was prior to.
Was that before Liverpool?
I was going to say. Aye, well, the Anfield rap, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always thought they've looked at that and thought, well, it worked for Liverpool, let's try that. You know what I mean?
I'm thinking of like the John Barnes bit in World in Motion. Obviously, that was 1990.
1990, yeah. So
But
the Anfield rap must have been around about the same time as the Celtic rap, 87, 88. I bought it, I've told you this before, Falkirk Market at Coasters. That's where I bought the Celtic rap. Don't know where it is. I think my big brother's probably got it. Jungle Lion, isn't it amazing the reporting of the two Glasgow managers? One was ridiculed, the other is a messiah. Same with two Celtic players on long contracts and two of them now reborn. Pathetic journalism again. Yeah, it is. It is amazing, but we probably shouldn't be surprised. JP, you mentioned one headline that obviously wasn't that long ago after a night out in Newcastle. I'll go back to the headline that likened Fergus McCann to Saddam Hussein. That was on the back pages of one of the tabloids. Blank check was another one when Joe Venglos came in.
Venglos, yeah.
So, yeah, they called him a blank check. And it goes on and on and on.
Doctor Who was another one, remember?
Doctor Who, yeah. Aye. And the Wim Jansen reaction as well.
I know Venglos didn't obviously win anything, but I don't think he could be considered a dud manager.
I think his legacy. He's got a legacy with the players they've signed as well.
Yeah, and obviously when he passed away, you saw the respect that he garnered from a lot of corners of the football world. And he was going up against a pretty juiced up Rangers side.
Absolutely.
They spent a lot of money. And I know it was a hard act to follow, taking over a team that had just won the league. There was obviously the momentum of that. And you saw last season when Rangers tried to do it after that season, they didn't have it in them to do it, because had they given everything towards going for 55, I hear that honestly, it's so embarrassing how they keep going on about. Mind last season when we won 52. Like, how weird does that sound?
I know.
It's so weird.
It is, though. They're underlining their belief that obviously the continuity myth.
Yeah, of course.
But it is. But going back to Venglos, I think I would need to check the record books. I think he only signed 6 players, and 3 of them were Mialbi, Moravcik, and Viduka. So he done okay. I think the other 3 were people like Tony Warner, Scott Marshall, and Vida Riseth. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he signed many more. There weren't many more players came in at that time. Mm-hmm. Was Tony Warner? Tony Warner was, because he played in the Lubos debut, the 5-1 game, which might just be over your shoulder. There we go. Vida Riseth, absolutely.
That was the first time I'd seen Celtic properly batter them, and it was glorious. It was a Saturday, but it felt like I think it got dark quite quickly, because it was obviously in November, wasn't it? And it was November, I think. Yeah, and so it got dark so it felt like kind of nighttime game by the time it was a 3:00 kickoff, if I remember rightly.
But deep as darkest November, the floodlights were on and all that kind of stuff by the end of the game.
Aye, because I remember when Burchell scored, it was definitely dark. When Burchell scored the 5th. And obviously, I'd kind of known him from growing up, being at school camp with him and all that. His school was at our school camp at the same time, and it was amazing seeing somebody that you kind of knew scoring against Rangers. It was
incredible. And his daughter has gone on to play for Celtic, Tyree.
Yeah,
probably the first. I think that's a first, isn't it? That a Celtic player and then their daughter has played for Celtic. Interesting. Kookaburra,
national level as well.
Is that right?
I'm sure she's capped at international level, or at whatever age group she's in.
Fair play. Axom, of course, are a patron of the Celtic women's team, and we support them, and hopefully we'll be covering a wee bit more of their games between now and the end of the season. Kookaburra, USA and Australia in the last 16, it must be the Celtic influence. Absolutely. Moy and, of course, Carter Vickers have impressed JP. But we ran with the headline, is Carter Vickers the best since Van Dijk? And obviously they're now going to face each other, potentially, if Carter Vickers keeps his jersey. Do you think CCV is the best since VVD?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, who's better?
Can't think of anybody that's anywhere near how many times have you come away from the games going, like, Carter Vickers was man of the match?
I know.
Or he's in the mix he's in the argument for man of the match, even if Jota's done outrageous things or Hatati's, had a blinder or whatever. He's always there or thereabouts. So
didn't we say at the beginning of the season, if you could keep one, who would it be out of Jota and Carter Vickers? And most of us were saying Carter Vickers.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody wanted to keep both, but I think I said Carter Vickers at the time, just because centre halves are such a rare breed of player to come across, one that you can just hang your hat on every single week, and you certainly can with him. And I didn't see the game the other night, but I saw all the glowing reports, and apparently he strolled it, and he was a massive factor in them. The manager, I think, decided to pick him. I mean, he did not kick the ball until that game, and then he comes out of nowhere and starts. So I think the manager picked him based on what he has to come up against every week in Scotland, as in teams that are, defending and trying to catch in the break. So they thought, right, well, I'll stick him in, and he's done really well and proved to everybody at the highest level how good a player he is, because you don't play at the highest level like that. Regardless of the opposition, any opposition that are in the World Cup are going to be decent. I mean, Canada looked good. Canada, that was the first time Canada had been in a major tournament since 1986.
I'm going to say something here that I've been thinking about since the World Cup started, but you sound like a dafty, I guess, if you say it. But when I was working with Andy Lynch, and Andy had a real understanding of American soccer, and obviously the NASL included various Canadian clubs, the Whitecaps, I think Montreal Manique were the team he played for. And he said in his book that in his lifetime, in Andy's lifetime, America will win the World Cup. And it was a bold statement, right? He said, because what will happen is whatever happens in terms of, say it, it could be like in any walk of your life, they want to be the absolute best. And we're going on about box office and Hollywood kind of movie. But one thing they never actually mastered yet is football. And they've tried since the 70s, and they've never quite done it. He says, but they will continually adapt and improve and progress to the point where they're a leader. Now, listen, it may or may not happen, but it just shows you the progress that's been made. And I don't know how far they're going to go, but it would be interesting if they continue to improve, because there are other footballing nations, JP, like ourselves, who I think have either gone backwards or stood still, and you've got these developing nations that are just getting better and better and better. And a lot of the thing that was missing before was the youth academy set up, but now that's in place. What you're seeing is generational talents now coming through. And I think when you look at the last 16, as a Celtic fan, what I wanted to see Maeda, Juranovic, Moy and Carter Vickers all in the last 16. It's going to be tough for Japan, coming up against Spain. That's going to be a tough. Croatia, I'm pretty confident they're going to be in the 16. Moy and Carter Vickers. So I think in terms of a Celtic World Cup, it's been really successful, even if those four guys don't get any further. For the four of them to get to this stage, I think has been really successful.
With relatively unfancied countries, I mean, you wouldn't really think that Japan would have had a hope of getting through that group. Australia had it tough as well, and because who did Australia get beat off? Was it France?
I'll just need to check that, mate.
Australia got beat either, I can't remember who they got beat off, but they got beat off who you would expect them to get beat. But winning against Denmark was massive. I actually know a friend of mine was actually at the game. He was posting pictures online of being in the ground, and I can only imagine it must have been incredible if there was a decent Australian contingent there for them to qualify. Because that's is that the second time they've ever qualified in their history out of a group in the World Cup?
It's incredible. Just looking at the league table, yeah, they've done so well.
We said that though, remember, before it started, that this would throw up a potential outsider winner. I still think that's a possibility. I don't think it'll be USA like Andy Lynch said, but I think there's an outsider's going to come, like a a race when all the majors fall at the last hurdle or whatever, and then someone just comes up the inside.
Steady Eddie, absolutely.
You just see the levels seem to be a bit more even. I mean, teams coming away with crazy results. Japan being one, Tunisia beating France, things like that. It's thrown up a lot of shock results, but then obviously the good teams usually get better as the tournament goes on, so you've got to bear that in mind as well. But like you said, I'm really, really happy for guys like Aaron Moy, who absolutely battered by so many in our support. He's too slow, he's this, he's that, get him out, why we signed him. Guys played every game for Australia in the World Cup, and they've qualified for the next round.
And his numbers rack up. I was asked a couple of weeks back when I was down in Manchester who I thought would win, and I said, I never know these things, but I'm going to be supporting Australia. So I'm delighted that they've gone as far as they have so far. We've got our Australian pals from Celtic Down Under who collaborate with AXOM. You were drinking out a 20-minute Tim's mug. It was great to see quite a lot of people tweeting out their Spotify league table end of season gig, whatever it is you call it. JP, I don't use Spotify. I feel a wee bit left out. I don't use it.
There's quite a few people up in arms at the fact that people listen to Spotify, and I get it. As you can see, I have physical music and I have vinyl as well down there. If I love a record, I'll buy it in vinyl because I like listening to vinyl. But unfortunately, the handiness of Spotify is what it is, and I do think that they don't compensate artists as well as they should, because the money that they must rake in globally is not evenly distributed amongst musicians. But that's unfortunately not enough for me to give up the small amount of money that I pay every month. I would far rather that the money was distributed better. But for me as a music nut, I do discover a lot of new music through Spotify. It throws up every Monday. It throws up a suggestion, like a playlist that is compiled based on what you listen to, and its algorithm is frightening. I mean, I've discovered loads of stuff that they put in the playlist on a Monday, and I'm like, whoa, who's this? And then straight away, like listening to the record, and then if I really, really like it, I'll buy the record from the band. So
there is that knock on,
and then I'll go and see them live. I'll buy a T-shirt. Buy a T-shirt, and that the cycle still works, but it doesn't work as well for the system. Still works, should I say? But it doesn't work as well for bands at a certain level who will always struggle. But oh my God, we've started talking about music and we're 58 minutes in. I'm sure there's comments coming in now going, "Oh, these guys just talk about music all the time." And
JP, I've got a whole section. I was going to talk about music, but we got kind of waylaid with the football. I was going to say though, I do remember it wasn't that long ago. Ali Beg took a picture of his royalty check from his days in Bad Boys Inc. So his most recent royalty check. It was maybe about a year ago, and it popped up on his Twitter. Seriously,
Ali Beg was in Bad Boys Inc.
Yes, man, he was. That was his big break. Ali Beg, yeah. Oh, yeah. He had
the Aberdeen guy.
That's him. Yep. Bad Boys Inc. He was, aye.
I mean, he kind of looks like he could have been in a boy band. But
he was.
If I didn't know
Bad Boys Inc. I think the royalty check was something like £8. I think that I mean, people are obviously still listening to Bad Boys Inc. somewhere in the world, and he got his. I think it's a quarterly royalty check you get as a musician, something like that. £8. So it obviously went on to bigger and better things. But Bad Boys Inc., check out the pictures, JP. Because it used to be on Celtic TV, remember?
Aye, I know, I remember. You need to be hitting like 1 million streams of a song before you're even going to make any sort of reasonable cash. It's very, very stacked in favour of Spotify. I mean, it's not the artists aren't doing well out of it. It's not ideal. It's not ideal at all. And I don't like the way that it's changed the way that you listen to music, because most people don't buy music anymore. Let's face facts. The record sales are massively down on what they once were, and that means it's harder for artists to continue being a band. There'll be bands that'll have to call it a day because they just can't do it anymore, and that's a worry because you're losing out on potentially life-changing albums and things like that.
The art that's going to be lost, JP. I mean, we spoke about this with Sean Ryder the other week, and he was talking about the situation he found himself in where he was being told by everybody that spoke to him, go bankrupt, because he was in a dispute with his ex-management team. And he refused to do it because he would have lost all his publishing on all his songs. That was his pension, basically. And eventually he got out the case, having given them about £500,000. But he still owns the publishing and the sales of his back catalogue. I'm just going to bring in a few comments before we leave. Jungle Lion, always welcome on the show. Get Musa back on loan. Listen, I'd love that. I would. I don't care about romanticism. I'd love to see Big Musa. The tweet coming out, the reveal. The big man's back. I'd love that. Kookaburra, if GG gets punted, there will be a revolt. He is a fan favourite. We spoke about that. There's a cult of Giakoumakis. Paddy Lavery, always an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us. The Urban Culture, here we go. Good news Rangers, bad news Celtic. It's World Cup break, cup title up for grabs. And like all previous breaks, when no football is on, they are running amok. Yeah, they are. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you like what we do, then support us by putting the big thumbs up on the YouTube video, subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. We were 22 away from the magical 20,000 figure, and everybody who subscribes, new and old, will be put into the prize draw to win the 2 tickets for the evening in May. There's other stuff you can do. You can buy some merchandise for Christmas. It's all in the links underneath the video. I love joining JP on a Thursday for a bit of music and football chat.
I must say a quick hello to Francie, who I met in Murphy's on Saturday. Very nice chap. He's a fan of the show. Knew a lot about me. It's quite terrifying. He knew about my granddad being Polish, hence the Poland strip, and was slagging me for my name as well. So I hope you're doing all right, Francie. It was a good night on Saturday.
Thanks for tuning in, Francie. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We're 600 strong today, which during World Cup time, when not much has happened domestically, is phenomenal. I mean, also, one final thing, you'll notice that we've spruced up the channel a wee bit on YouTube. We're splitting the channel up, JP, so we're going to have Celtic-only content on the Axom channel. We're setting up a new channel for all the music and film and other chat, politics even. So we're going to split it up. So if the music stuff isn't your thing, you can subscribe and be notified, and it'll be Celtic only content on the YouTube. So there you are. Thanks everybody.
People, I'm sure.
It will please loads of folk. Thanks everybody for supporting what we do. It's always a pleasure, and thank you once again, JP Mason, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.